So next in this, the consequences of the global economic environment for sustainable development. The COVID-19 epidemic has still spreading and mutating across nations, and the prognosis for the world economy is still gloomy. Well, the pandemic, we can say, is almost at its decline now, but still there are some countries which are languishing with it, and a big number of like patients are still there, and yeah, majorly the world has opened now, but except some restrictions and some places, so according to the UN, the world economy would barely recover from its loss of minus 4.3% in 2020. Well, this was the projection from earlier year, with a slight 4.7% growth in 2021. There is a lot of uncertainty around the baseline forecast, including issues with vaccine access, the spread of the virus and its more contagious strains, the effectiveness of environmental assistance measures, and debt and sustainability. In light of this, it is anticipated that the global recovery would be shaky and unequal. Well, this actually report has come from 2019, but we saw this unfolding in different countries in different parts of the world, like how it has hampered growth and development of different countries, how it has brought down a number of industrial sectors such as tourism, etc., right, drastically down, like aviation, right. So worst hit industries, and the worst very badly in demand is health sector and all. There is too much of stress and strain on this a healthcare industry, healthcare sector, right. So this has actually shaked, if you see, to a larger extent, and majority of the countries, they have reported a growth in minus. The pandemic's severe economic crisis have widened disparities already present and jeopardized the accomplishment of the Sustainable Development Goals. The pandemic and economic crisis have exacerbated debt and other vulnerabilities, disproportionately affecting those with lower levels of education and income, leading to sharp increases in unemployment, poverty, hunger, and inequality, and negatively affecting women, the young, and the marginalized groups in society. Additionally, it has quickened the pace of automation and digitization, which means that many of the jobs lost during the recession might not be replaced. Well, at individual level, if you see, this pandemic has taken a huge toll. A number of people have lost their jobs, or they have been working from home. Their maybe working hours were reduced, cut, right. Their wages were reduced or cut, right. So a number of such doldrums have happened at individual level, right. If you see here, this pandemic has given great rise in unemployment. A number of people are rendered jobless, since their industries, their workplaces were shut, right. So how can they will be working, and in such a stopping and volatile actually market, it is almost impossible to get a new job also, right. So this has pushed a number of individuals, households, and families into a poverty, right. So you see these terms over here. Even inequality, certain sectors were actually had above the burnt little more, and yeah, negatively affecting women and young and generally elderly and marginalized groups. But yes, there has been one good point also. This pandemic has given rise to automation, software automation, application based automation, helped by internet and computing devices such as smartphones and computers, etc. And digitization in an overall sense. In Indian economy itself, if you see, a number of e-payment portals and e-transaction portals have actually come up, including from a government initiative such as BHIM, right, and which has helped a very small scale transactions also to happen online. Even 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupee transactions one can do online, saving on a hard cash, so which has actually enabled like a number of people to take help of internet and set up their shop and do their business like online to the far away places also, because transportation was one of them like majorly like a hit areas. Okay, so how this automation and like evolution revolution in IT sector has helped like Indian economy and many others, right? So whoever has taken a lead, they have benefited out of like this situation, right? But yes, there were some jobs which could not be actually taken back because of this automation also. So there is always a kind of like reshuffling and replacement by either machines or tools or equipment for the manpower, right? So how this actually gets compensated? Okay, so those people need like extra training or maybe some new kind of like a training, skill development, etc., to like get themselves like some working environment, working jobs, right? So that kind of reshuffling. Unusual policy decisions prevented harsher consequences, but many developing nations still run the danger of experiencing a lost decade. Yeah. So if you see, that was a very volatile like a time, and to minimize the overall impact, governments, different governments across the world, they have taken very unique and unusual kind of like decisions and policy measures to minimize the overall consequences. Well, those decisions might have hampered like somebody's like working environment or like work opportunity, but has benefited like overall society to a larger extent, or at least it has avoided the catastrophic ending to like this pandemic, right? But still like if you see in education sector, right, so even though education actually continued in online mode, but like a lab based courses and several like such things which can be experienced like physically by being physically present over there. Okay, those learnings that could not actually take place to the like a greater extent, well, of course, up to the certain extent. Okay, so those batches which have come out of like these like years might feel like deprived on like some components like in education, and similarly many such like fields, they feel like a gap, a kind of like a sudden jerk, like a dip during this like a pandemic years, right? So well, at least the good thing is in the even in this pandemic, that the whole of like this is not void, this is not lost, it is not completely zero. Okay, so at least we have saved on that. At least like students have graduated, they have got their degrees, they have moved on in their life, right? So of course it's not so happy, but at least it's not zero also. It's not a kind of like a lost years, right? So at least like these measures have helped like a prevailing over this like a pandemic like a time. The immediate health crisis needed to be addressed, economies and employment needed to be supported, and a financial catastrophe needed to be avoided. Yeah, so several measures to help economy to sustain like this kind of like a jerk, this kind of like a sudden like abruption, and move on with minimal damages like a possible, right? However, 114 million full-time employment were lost in 2020, and the crisis runs the danger of having a long-term negative impact on the economy and lowering the potential production of the global economy. Well, so you can see the number, when we talk about like employments being lost due to pandemic. Here is this number, 114 million. Okay, so these many actually full-time employees, they lost like their job, right, bringing those many individuals and respectively like their families, their households to a vulnerable situation. The level of company bankruptcies and permanent firm closures, the number of disgruntled workers, and long-term shifts in consumer behavior are some of the variables that affect how much these effects are felt across economies. So some more like a finer points in this. If you see, a number of companies actually went bankrupt, they could not sustain like this jerk, they could not make enough profits to continue, and they filed for bankruptcies. And many of them filed for like a permanent closures, like they shut their companies for always, right? So that's a full end, full stop to their regular like working, which has been like a kind of a common thing till before the pandemic stuck. Okay, so that's a major change, because like all of the people stakeholder involved in those kind of companies, their actually work has came to a full stop, right? So that's a major actually disruption. Number of disgruntled workers, of course there was a lot of dissatisfaction and anxiety and all of that among like workers, because of like a such situation. If your company has filed for bankruptcy, of course it's going to like have its impact on its employees, its workers, right? And similarly the companies which have closed, where else the like workers will go, where they will else they will find like their suitable like jobs, right? And working profiles, etc., right? So this brings like a dissatisfaction and unhappiness among like workers. So how to deal with that, because this number was really like a huge, right? Long term shifts in consumer behavior, yeah, another like a point. Since this pandemic actually stuck, a number of people went on completely like stopping their regular spendings, right? And spending were allowed only on the bare essentials, like necessary commodities, and nothing else, right? So that has further like added to the fuel that like an inflow of revenues has like reduced dramatically, like significantly, bringing a number of more ancillary like working units and like companies and organizations to a bare minimum like a level of sale, or almost like a nil sale, right? So that has also contributed to this catastrophe, right? You cannot blame also to the consumer, because it's a pandemic, it's a very odd timing, right? So unless and until you do not feel like a protected and like a saved, why else would you go for spending, right? So that's not our often like making like a merry and like enjoyment, right? So people went on into the defensive mode and adding more fuel to the fire, right? Yeah, and this has been felt like across like a different economies in the whole world, well, but hopefully like things are like now almost like back to normal, and spending habits are like coming back, and there is like a huge revival in the different industrial sectors, like seeing, including tourism and aviation, etc., right, in these days. Macroeconomic policy must be carefully balanced to provide a fair and long-lasting recovery. For those who develop macro policy, the global economic and financial crisis and its aftermath provide important insights. So here, if you see, we are talking about like a macroeconomic policy decisions, because this actually touches like a huge like a number of industrial like units and like different sectors. Okay, so how this can be actually driven like a carefully to have a long lasting like a recovery, so that they can come back, to their like a normal like a position and normal functioning, and they can like revive themselves like a fully back. A weak economic recovery might be derailed by the premature removal of monetary and fiscal supports. So you may be aware of different countries actually started giving like a monetary and fiscal supports to like a majority of companies which were on the verge of closure, just to like keep them afloat, and yeah, once the actually economy revives, at least to like bring them till that like a time, so that like at least they can sail through that like a horrible period, and yeah, they are not they do not fall actually prey to the like a this pandemic and go like for complete closure, right? But those actually the point here is those like policies, like they must actually like be of such a nature that they are helping these units to survive for a longer period of time, for like always, right? So that is the important part. A financial crisis in early 2020 may have been avoided with the help of extraordinary central bank monetary easing and large scale like scale interventions, but extended periods of loose liquidity can cause worries about inflation, debt vulnerability, and financial market stability. So you may be aware of, during that period, the apex bank of India, like RBI, Reserve Bank of India, with the help of government of India and finance ministry and many such important stakeholders, they released policy documents, several policies, and aid, programs for industries, to help them survive this catastrophe, this epidemic, right? And definitely it has helped, it has bear a fruit, and a majority of them are saved. Well, thankfully now our Indian economy is back, almost back to the normal, and majority of industrial sectors are now recording a good growth, right, bringing a normalcy in everyday life, right? So yeah, tackling inflation, tackling debt vulnerability, financial market, a stability, etc., has been the a prime target, during this a period. Investments in low carbon technology and robust sustainable infrastructure may promote economic development, reduce inequality, and hasten the transition to climate resilient economies. However, a single investment like this won't be enough to successfully mitigate climate change, and measures like carbon pricing, the end of fossil fuel subsidies, a drive for sustainable investment, and funding for green energy research and innovation are all necessary. Okay, so now talking about some a more interesting environmental factors, which are in a way, if you see industry and environment, they more or less they sit at the two opposite poles, because as long as industry is utilizing conventional fuels like fossil fuels, etc., it has very high impact, very high rate of pollution and resource consumption, etc., which is totally against the environmental parameters, environmental safeguarding parameters, right? But definitely there are possibilities that these two should not sit poles apart, at the two opposite poles, but this industry can bringing some major changes in its frameworking and structuring, and may try coming closer to the a fully compliance to the environmental concerns. Okay, so there is this, we can call it as a paradigm shift in the industrial conventional industrial system, to come closer in compliance to the environmental considerations, environmental parameters, right? So what are those? So investing in low carbon technology. So you see, you may have heard of a carbon. Okay, so carbon is one of the major elements which brings a lot of issues on our planet. If you see like a CO2, etc. Okay, so carbon is at the heart of these molecules, and by its own physical natural properties, these molecules, they are heat absorbent, plus they retain heat, they radiate heat at the some other time, right? And there are several repercussions. Okay, so in a in a nutshell, these carbon based actually elements, carbon based molecules and compounds, they are one of the major agents for bringing this catastrophic change on the environmental scenario, right? So how we can go for low carbon technology is the main point. So this is not a rocket science to understand. You can simply understand we want to minimize on the carbon part. Okay, so how this can be done is investment into that kind of researches. Okay, so this is what simply we are talking about. Okay, and bringing robust sustainable infrastructure, so the infrastructure which is sustainable. So sustainability as a characteristic, as a feature in all of these things, in the a technology also which is going into the infrastructure which we are generating and creating these days for our support of economy and everyday life, that, plus overall economic development what we are seeking, that should also comply to those sustainable parameters, right? Reducing inequality, now going into the social dimensions, social sustainability dimensions, bringing everyone together, leaving no one behind, right? So satisfying those mottos, those goals also, Okay, so in an overall sense, if you see like ESCs again will come into the picture immediately when we are talking sustainability, right? So how to take care of all of these, like three aspects, respectfully is the actually concern. Okay, so for that it is essential to invest in low carbon technology, investing in robust and sustainable infrastructure which may promote economic development of the place, reduce inequality, which works for even social factors, okay, hasten the transition to climate resilient economies. Yeah, so you may be aware of like a climate change as a phenomena, is bringing like a lot of havoc to the different countries, El Nino, etc. There are several like such things going on across the world, which scientists are theorizing that these are actually climate change induced like changes or abruptions which are which our planet is registering. Okay, so by reducing the climate change as a phenomena, we can definitely like reduce on those impacts also, right, because these two are directly related, directly proportional. Okay, so a reduction in climate change factors will definitely bring like a change in the climate change induced like impacts on the society and the environment, on our economies. So that is what actually we are talking about over here. However, a single investment like this won't be enough to successfully mitigate climate change, and measures like carbon pricing, the end of fossil fuel subsidies, a drive for sustainable investment, and funding for green energy research and innovation are all necessary. So some like a points over here. If you see mitigating climate change, that's what we spoke over here, and measures like carbon pricing. So every unit of every unit volume of like a carbon based like compounds which are getting emitted in the atmosphere should be actually taxed, should be actually priced, right? So those old like era technologies which are like a highly gas guzzlers or highly like a hydrocarbon like guzzlers, right, and very high emitters, those must be actually charged extra in addition to what is their like a normal pricing, right, to reduce like their like a consumption, their uses, right, and indirectly force like those companies, those organizations to adopt much greener or safer like a technological solutions which are existing today. And yeah, ending fossil fuel subsidies. So you may be like aware of like India in the like since its independence used to like offer subsidies on the hydrocarbon based fuels like petrol, diesel, kerosene, right, and LPG gas, etc. But in the recent like years, the like a government has slowly like brought down those subsidies and finally like removing like completely, and bringing these like like materials at par with the like a market prices. So whichever like a price it is available in the international market, will be available to the like a consumer. Okay, so there is no more like any subsidy like being offered on like LPG gas like connections to households or even commercials, and except like a few to those people who are at I think below poverty level, or maybe they need like a public distribution like a support like a system. So except like those category people, for normal like a society, this is like available at the market price, right, including petrol, diesel, like such things. Diesel used to be like a heavily subsidized because diesel like was used by heavy industrial units such as tractors, trucks, etc., which directly help our economy, which help farmers, like companies, etc. But now that is also almost withdrawn, and diesel is also available at the market price. So this is being propagated as one of the like regions which will curb, which will help curb like a consumption of like these hydrocarbons. Well, it requires I think independent research whether it has I think given its desired like objective or not. But yeah, this was the intention behind like these policies, these like steps. A drive for sustainable investment and funding for green energy research and innovation and all. So green energy research, if you see over here, is the one like a interesting point. Since energy is at the heart of like any industry, any like a such like a like an initiative or working, what you and me will be doing. Okay, or industries will do, or governments will do, or like other like units will do. Okay, so an investment and research into this area becomes very crucial, because if we promote this, then only we will be able to save on to the like a fossil fuel based like a technologies and uses, right? So, and a particular attention is needed to be poured in this actually area. And of course, the buzzword of like this year, like this like a decade, is this innovation word, right? So innovation, in any and all like such steps, which may actually prove crucial for environment, society and economics. Okay, so yeah, thinking on those lines also. And of course, you may be aware of, innovation doesn't requires any particular training or education or particular background, etc. I think anybody at any level from anywhere can like come up with innovative solutions. So definitely one must like be aware of what is going on in their place, in their surrounding, and strive for improving on the existing like systems, to improve on like a ESG aspects. So definitely I invite and I suggest and I encourage you also to think about any like a innovative idea if you have, or if you have like a come across, to share and bring it to the like everyone's uses. Yeah, so moving on. So this is like the graph you may be aware of, you may have seen already like how the world has registered a dip in the the growth and development. Okay, so that is given over here. This is this base like a 0 plus minus 0. Okay, and plus 2 plus 4 plus 6 minus 2 minus 4 minus 6, and these are the years given over here, 2015 to like a 2022, right? F is like a forecast, so years like a 21 and 22 are showing still in forecast. Okay, and E for the year 2020 is the estimate. Okay, maybe you can refer your own country's latest data for like up to date information, like latest information. Yeah, according to the United Nations World Economic Situation and Prospects 2021, the world economy will grow by 4.7% in 2021 and 3.4% in 2022, following a significant decline of 5.6% in 2020. Average growth in developed economies is predicted to rebound to 4% in 2021, following a decrease of 2.5% in 2020. Growth in emerging economies is predicted to reach 5.6% in 2021. Yeah, so here you see average annual GDP per capita by different regions. Okay, so the list you can see over here, this first set belongs to Eastern Asia, Central Asia, Southeastern Asia, Eastern Europe. So these three are like Asians over here, and plus including here Southern Asia, Western Asia. Okay, here we have Eastern Europe, Africa, and Latin and Caribbean. Okay, so in these ones, if you see, this is almost in the order of like a decrease. So Eastern Asia, like a average annual GDP per capita growth by region, if you see, this is the year. In blue you will see 96 to 2017, in yellow you will see 2018 to 19, and green you will see 2020 to 2022. Okay, so what is this like a suggestion over here? You can see, yeah, slight decline, a huge decline, like this. This has gone in negative, this has gone in negative, negative, negative. So if you see the first four regions, Eastern Asia, Central Asia, Southeastern Asia, and Eastern Europe, at least they are not zero. If you see the like these green, the green bar is still in the positive side, above zero. Okay, whereas in these four regions, Southern Asia, Western Asia, Africa, and Latin America, and the Caribbean, it has gone in negative. So here slightly negative, here like quite large, up to -2, up to -1 point, I think 6 or 7 or something, percentage, it has gone down in negative, right? So this is the impact, like what we are talking about. In emerging nations, losses in output and per capita income have reversed years of economic growth. Yeah, So whatever has like been accumulated over like those many years, if you see this data is from like a beginning year 1996, it has gone down in many places to a very low levels, like here in these three, to totally in the negative in these four like regions. So all of those efforts they have gone down to the like a negative. This is the like a catastrophic like situation we are talking about. Definitely like now these bars actually must like come above. So just you can Google what is happening for the like a latest like a data, if it is recorded, because actually data we may not be it may not be possible for you to get to the year like a present year's data, because it requires like a huge time and investment and like efforts to prepare like these like data sets, right. So usually we get like a such like a datas for at least like 2 years or so like from before, right. So maybe you can search for it. All areas have seen a reduction in per capita GDP growth, and in over a third of emerging nations, income per capita has fallen after rising for a decade or more. In Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, income losses have been the greatest. So, yeah, this chart suggests like that thing. Global investment trends, like see like how the investment has like shown its trend. Okay, so you can see a dip here in year 2019 because of that recession, and another one like right here in the year 2020. Okay, so all of these years, if you see this solid green actually talks about advanced economies here, like this line, and the linear trend like what is that is like this dotted like a green, slightly like a declining, not much but slightly on decline. And emerging market and developing economies, EMDs, you can see here shown in yellow. Okay, so that is going like a zigzag, but yeah, majorly this is also coming down. So a linear trend you can see is coming down to a greater extent, right. EMD is exclusive like China over here is shown in this light blue. Okay, this is this line. Okay, so that is also registering like some decline over the years, right. So this is the source. You can search for latest data. So I think from this graph you can see, you can say also that like a majority of like a such like economies from advanced like a grades to like emerging markets and developing like economies, the world's economy is slowly like a going down. Okay, except a few like exceptions, and India is also one of the like exceptional countries which is registering a positive growth. Decline in investment and GDP after pandemics. Okay, so that percentage like number you can see over here, and all of these are in negative, unfortunately. So investment is shown in this blue, and yellow is for output. So you can see here like the T group, T plus 1, T plus 2, T plus 5, in this scenarios like how it is changing. And this is the source from World Bank. So it shows like a decline in investment right after pandemic. Investment growth in developed economies. So here you can see the first like a group belongs over here to like United States, then Germany, United Kingdom, Australia, and Japan, the major like world economies. Okay, and how they are faring. So, and these color shades actually they differ. You can see over here red non-residential construction, green residential, blue machinery and equipment, yellow intellectual property products, and black like for total, this black rhombus. Okay, so yeah, the largest hit is recorded here in United Kingdom. You can see this is this position. Growth of gross fixed formation in developing regions. So Southern Asia, Eastern Europe and Central Asia, Southeastern Asia, Africa, Western Asia, Latin America and Caribbean, and different years are notated by different colors. This is the source UNDESA. Okay, so you can see majorly in the year 2020, which is shown in red, like they all have come down in the negative. Okay, so at all places, the largest like a dip registered in Latin America and the Caribbean. Increase in general government debt during past crisis. So that is shown in these on the left hand. If you see, we have billions of US dollars. Okay, so from 0 to like 12,000 like billions of dollars in this scale, and here we have on this axis different years, 1998 to 2009 to 2020. Okay, and light blue developed economies, developing economies by yellow, and green economies in transition. Okay, and overall world general government debt as percentage of GDP is shown in black line. Okay, so you can see this distribution. So how small it was in this year, and how like like a tall this has become in year 2020. Projected impact of climate change on GDP. Okay, so here you can see this whole world's like a map is painted in this like a spectrum. Okay, and if there is a huge like impact that is like shown in this yellow like a shade, up to maximum 200% like a change in GOP, okay, per capita by year 2100 compared to a world without climate change. Okay, so and on the other side minus 100% shown by like this blue. Okay, so this is this distribution of almost like a 300% like a range. Okay, so you can see the largest like a change like occurring is in Canada, these Nordic like a countries, this cluster over here, Russia, like a Mongolia, and some lighter shades in the majority of like this Europe over here, including like United Kingdom. Okay, so global north like majorly is registering like a larger like a change, and except like United like States of America over here, and then Japan, China, like Australia, New Zealand, other major economies I'm talking about, South Africa, right, Spain over here, and South American countries, and Mexico, right. So this actually part is majorly into the like a blue shades, right. So India also will register, it is in blue, so not this thing, but there is like a negative like an impact which is going to like happen in this like a like a shaded like a countries. So if you see United States, Spain, Italy, and these Afghanistan, like China, Japan, Australia, they are going to like register like a change, like an impact like of minus like a value negative impact, and yeah, India I think is little like a more than that, and the largest like impact which is going to happen is in the Indonesia, like this like a group, like here we have Thailand, like Vietnam, etc. Then Gulf countries, a majority of African countries, like Brazil, Mexico. These are the countries. A risk and resilience framework. Okay, so as we saw over here, this actually is this analysis which talks about which country is going to register positive impact or negative impact, up to like what range of like that impact, like like how bad or how good. Okay, So it poses like a huge risk, and vulnerability of like a global scale. If you see, this is so big, so like a mammoth, that it is almost touching like a majority of like this like a part of the world, except like a few from the top. Okay, so it's a majority of the like populations of the world like live in these like regions, and they are all together at like a negative like impact, negative like a risk. Okay, so how that risk can minimize and mitigated becomes the like the next point of discussion. Okay, so in this slide we have like risk and resilience like a framework, SDGs progress over time, because SDGs carry that potential to safeguard everyone's like interests, etc. Okay, so this side we have SDG progress, and this side we have time. Okay, so understanding the risk, preventing, mitigating the risk, you know and this is this point where you register the shock, you register the hazard, reduce impact, share, transfer, then you come down to like a minimize like at this level. Okay, and then you start recovering. Okay, so this is this like a recovery like a period, like this green one you can see. Okay, and as usual it continues at this like this thing, right? So it shows like this like a relation with the like a time scale. So on all of these fronts, if you see, like which are those like agencies which are trying to like help mitigate like such issues. Okay, so financing institutions, banking institutions actually come at the forefront, because we are discussing like financing like the SDGs. Okay, so how to take care of like these like frameworks, and who are the agencies which are going to fund. Okay, so in that like a number of agencies come into the picture, and I have listed down over here like a number of multilateral banks which help like mitigate like such like impacts. And these are the like agencies, these are the stakeholders who are investing a lot in SDGs and their implementation, right? So multilateral development banks, MDBs, and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, you may be aware of already, work closely together to support sustainable development in multiple ways and forums. The heads of these institutions interact regularly, typically gathering alongside the IMF and World Bank Group spring and annual meetings. These meetings foster informal exchanges on shared challenges and opportunities, as well as common positions on critical global issues such as the response to the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, what we know of. Okay, so these banks actually like are at the forefront of sharing, or like a lending, like a funding to the implementation agencies for effective and timely like implementation. So that is the like a crux. Okay, so we'll see. So one by one you can see on this like a slide like a contributions of these multilateral banks, and some like a quantum of this funding also you can see, like how much they have like helped with. Okay, so first one, African Development Bank, you can see it was established in 1964, right? And headquarters like a location of like a working, and the annual financing like a most recent reported year in US dollars. So all of these figures are in US dollars. Okay, so 7.3 billion like a US dollars is the like a funding this bank has actually dealt with. So mandate on which it works is spur sustainable economic development and social progress in its regional member countries, thus contributing to poverty reduction. So Africa, we all know, is one of the most vulnerable like a places from economic vulnerability like a point of view. Okay, so the role of this multilateral bank, African Development Bank, actually becomes very crucial. Further, we have Asian Development Bank, ADB. You may have heard of in news articles, etc. Like this agency actually keeps on funding for sustainable infrastructural like projects in different countries, including India also, some like instances. Okay, so ADB founded in 1966 in Manila, Philippines, and its like focus regions are Asia and the Pacific, and 21.6 billion US dollars is its annual financing like figure, and it is committed to achieving a prosperous, inclusive, resilient and sustainable Asia and the Pacific while sustaining its efforts to eradicate extreme poverty. Further, we have Asian Infrastructure and Investment Bank, AIIB, okay, founded in 2016 in Beijing, China, okay, and it works at the Asian and beyond like regions. So the funding 4.5 like $1 billion. CEB, Council of Europe Development Bank, okay, 1956 in Paris, France, okay, works across Europe, and yeah, $4.6 billion. Then we have European Bank, okay, in 1991, London, UK. It works in Africa, Asia and Europe, okay, annual financing of $11.8 billion.